Something extraordinary is happening right now in the Middle East, and the mainstream media is barely covering it. Iran, one of the most defiant and strategically calculating nations in the entire world, a country that has spent decades saying it will never bow to Western pressure, never negotiate from a position of weakness, never surrender its regional ambitions, is now showing signs that it may be ready to come to the table on terms it would have rejected just 2 years ago. And the country that is being called in to help broker, guide, and manage this extraordinary moment in geopolitical history? Pakistan. Not the United States, not Russia, not China, Pakistan. Think about what that means. Think about what it tells you about how dramatically the balance of power and the architecture of diplomacy in this region has shifted. If you have been following the news and feeling like something big is happening but you can't quite put the pieces together, this video is going to do exactly that. We are going to connect every dot, explain every development, and tell you what this means not just for Iran and Pakistan, but for the entire world order as we know it. Stay right here. Because what is unfolding right now is one of the most significant geopolitical moments of the last decade, and you need to understand it. Welcome to Foxy Global News, the channel where we cut through the noise, skip the spin, and bring you the real story behind the headlines that are shaping our world. Whether it is breaking geopolitical developments, military strategy, diplomatic shifts, or the economic forces driving global conflict, this is your home for analysis that actually makes sense. If this is your first time here, welcome, and please subscribe to Foxy Global News right now before we go any further. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notification so you never miss a breaking update. We cover the stories that matter with the depth they deserve, and we publish regularly. This community is growing fast, and I want you to be part of it. Now, let's get into what is happening with Iran, what Pakistan's role in all of this really means, and why this situation, code referenced by analysts as CWSJ 3212, represents a potential turning point that experts are calling one of the most consequential geopolitical developments of our generation. To understand where we are today, you have to understand how Iran arrived at this point. Because Iran does not make moves out of weakness without a reason. This is a country with a deeply strategic political culture, a government that has survived decades of international sanctions, military pressure, internal unrest, and direct confrontation with the most powerful nations on Earth. Iran does not signal flexibility unless the pressure has become truly unbearable, or unless there is a strategic calculation that a controlled negotiation is better than a chaotic collapse. So what changed? What broke the dam? Several things converged at the same time. And that convergence is exactly what makes this moment so significant. First, the economic situation inside Iran has reached a level of severity that the government can no longer manage through propaganda and control alone. The Iranian rial has collapsed in value over the past 2 years to a degree that has genuinely shocked even analysts who were predicting bad outcomes. Inflation is running at levels that are destroying the purchasing power of ordinary Iranian families at a pace the government cannot hide. Food prices, fuel prices, basic goods, all of it has become increasingly difficult for average Iranians to afford. And unlike previous periods of economic hardship, this time the population's tolerance appears to be at a genuine breaking point. The protest movements that shook Iran in recent years, particularly the wave that followed the death of Mahsa Amini, did not disappear. They went underground. They became more structured, more coordinated, and more dangerous to the regime's long-term stability. The leadership in Tehran is not blind to this. They understand that a government facing simultaneous external pressure and internal revolt has a very narrow window before the situation moves beyond its control. Second, the regional military picture has shifted in ways that fundamentally changed Iran's strategic calculus. The network of proxy forces and allied militias that Iran spent decades building across the Middle East, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq, has been significantly degraded over the past 18 months. Key figures have been eliminated. Supply lines have been disrupted. Financial flows have been interdicted. The deterrence architecture that Iran relied upon to project power without direct confrontation has been weakened in ways that will take years to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. This is not a small thing. Iran's entire regional strategy was built on the concept of strategic depth, the idea that it could deter direct military action against its own territory by making any attacker pay an enormous cost across multiple fronts simultaneously. When that deterrence network is degraded, Iran's vulnerability increases dramatically, and the leadership in Tehran knows it. Third, the diplomatic window that Iran has been waiting for. A moment when the major powers are distracted, divided, or incentivized to offer Iran a meaningful deal, has opened in a way that Iran's strategists believe may not stay open for long. The United States is dealing with its own political turbulence. European nations are stretched thin by ongoing conflicts closer to home. Russia is deeply committed elsewhere. China, while sympathetic to Iran in many ways, has its own complex interests that do not always align with what Tehran needs. Iran's calculation appears to be this: negotiate now from a position of relative strength compared to where you will be in 12 months, or risk being forced to negotiate later from a position of genuine desperation. This is not surrender in the traditional sense. This is strategic repositioning. But the signals being sent, through back channels, through neutral intermediaries, through carefully calibrated public statements, are clear to anyone paying close attention. And this brings us to Pakistan. Why Pakistan? Why is this nation of 230 million people, with its own enormous domestic challenges, its own complex relationship with both the United States and China, its own history of tension with its neighbors, being identified as the key player in helping to facilitate whatever comes next? The answer is both simpler and more profound than most people realize. Pakistan is one of the very few countries on Earth that has genuine working relationships with nearly every major party involved in this situation simultaneously. Pakistan has deep historical, cultural, and religious ties with Iran that go back centuries. The two countries share a long border. They share a Shia Muslim population that creates bonds of identity that transcend political differences. Pakistan has always maintained a relationship with Tehran, even during periods when much of the world was isolating Iran. At the same time, Pakistan has a strategic partnership with China, a complex but ongoing relationship with the United States, strong ties across the Gulf states including Saudi Arabia and the UAE, countries that are deeply invested in what happens with Iran, and a position within the Islamic world that gives it a kind of moral and political authority on Muslim world issues that few other nations can claim. Pakistan also has something else that is critically important in diplomacy of this sensitivity: experience with navigating extraordinarily complex multi-party negotiations under conditions of high stakes and high secrecy. Pakistan's intelligence services and its foreign ministry have been involved in back-channel diplomacy involving some of the most sensitive negotiations of the last 3 decades. They know how to move quietly. They know how to carry messages between parties that cannot be seen talking to each other directly. They know how to create the conditions in which a deal becomes possible without either side losing face publicly. There is also a personal dimension to this that is worth noting. The relationships between senior figures in Pakistan's foreign policy and diplomatic establishment and their counterparts in Tehran are long-standing, deep, and built on genuine mutual respect. In diplomacy, personal relationships matter enormously, particularly in Middle Eastern and South Asian political culture, where trust between individuals can open doors that formal institutional channels cannot. So what exactly is Pakistan's role in what is being described as the CWSJ 3212 framework? Based on what analysts and intelligence observers are reporting, Pakistan is serving as a combination of message carrier, trust builder, and framework architect. It is carrying specific proposals between Tehran and other parties. It is helping Iran understand what a realistic and face-saving agreement could look like. It is helping the other parties understand what Iran actually needs, as opposed to what Iran's public statements suggest it needs, in order to come to an agreement. This distinction between public position and actual need is everything in a negotiation of this complexity. Iran publicly says it will never agree to certain things, but every experienced diplomat knows that public positions are not the same as actual red lines. Pakistan, with its access and its trust on all sides, is uniquely positioned to help translate between what is being said publicly and what is actually possible privately. The stakes of this moment cannot be overstated. A genuine structured agreement that reduces Iran's nuclear program, reintegrates Iran into the global economic system in some meaningful way, and creates a framework for regional stability in the Middle East would be one of the most consequential diplomatic achievements of the 21st century. It would reshape energy markets. It would change the security architecture of the entire region. It would have profound implications for the relationship between the West and the Islamic world, and it would establish Pakistan, a country that the world often underestimates and frequently misunderstands, as one of the most important diplomatic actors on the planet. None of this is guaranteed. Negotiations at this level fail more often than they succeed. The domestic political forces inside Iran that are opposed to any deal are real and powerful. The factions within the Iranian government that see accommodation with the West as an existential threat to the Islamic Republic's identity will not go quietly. And the external parties, including Israel, which has its own profound concerns about any agreement that leaves Iran with residual nuclear capability, will work actively to complicate or derail any framework they find unacceptable. But the fact that this conversation is happening at all, the fact that Iran is sending signals, that Pakistan has been brought in, that the back channels are active, is itself a historic development, and the world needs to be paying attention. Let's bring this all together because I want to make sure you leave this video with a clear picture of what is actually happening and why it matters so deeply. Iran is not collapsing, but it is under more simultaneous pressure, economic, military, diplomatic, and internal, than it has faced at any point in the last 2 decades. And for the first time in a very long time, its leadership appears to be genuinely calculating whether a structured negotiation is a better path forward than continued defiance. Pakistan has emerged as the indispensable intermediary in this process, not because anyone handed it that role, but because it has earned it. Through decades of careful relationship building, strategic positioning, and diplomatic credibility with parties on every side of this divide, Pakistan has become the one country that everyone in this equation is willing to trust enough to talk through. Whether this moment leads to a historic agreement or collapses under the weight of its own complexity remains to be seen. But what is certain is that the geopolitical map of the Middle East, and the global order that surrounds it, is shifting right now, in real time. And the decisions being made in back rooms in Tehran, Islamabad, and the capitals of the major powers over the coming weeks and months will shape the world that all of us live in for the next generation. This is why Foxy Global News exists, to make sure you are not watching history happen from the outside, but that you understand it from the inside as it unfolds. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what is happening in the world right now, please give it a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to understand this story. And if you have not yet subscribed to Foxy Global News, do it right now. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join a community of people who refuse to accept surface-level coverage of the most important events of our time. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Pakistan can pull this off? Do you believe Iran is genuinely ready to come to the table? I read every comment, and your perspective matters. Thank you for watching Foxy Global News. Stay informed, stay sharp, and we will see you in the next one.